After 5 years of grueling and painful work, I have finally become YouTube's best editor. Now, I'm at a point where I've worked with some of YouTube's biggest creators, and it's to the point where I've worked with more creators that I can't talk about than ones that I can talk about legally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some official proof that I can publicly share with you to prove that I am YouTube's best editor. So let's go over here to the box of proof where I show my client list of public clients. I have a good relationship with all of these guys. We can see the outputs of my work. See, we're getting consistent 1 out of 10s. We're getting 70% retention on a 20-minute video. And we are getting my concepts and my ideas copied by actual companies here in the UK. We can see that when I make videos for my creators, the ideas they get so viral and popular, they are consistently used and abused, and they're even being copied by other YouTubers in the UK. And then on top of that, I can say stuff like this to my clients. I'm obviously not going to show you what the official word is, but you can probably have a guess. And there are no consequences because ultimately the result does come around. You can see the numbers are substantially better than the previous editor. And, I can make a good prediction of how things go with my views and my retention now because I've done that much research. Now, obviously, that's not really enough. How can I really say I'm YouTube's best editor with just that alone? Of course, I wish I could tell you the creators that I have worked with, but unfortunately we can't. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be showing you the work that I've done with some of the editors that I'm now training to become the next line of YouTube's best editors. We can see here, these guys are getting paid crazy amounts of money for their videos. So we're seeing like 3K per video. We can see more people like that. We can see like 5K per video. We can see the clients, they have landed, not attracted, landed. We can see the beautiful work that they are doing over here with their clients. It looks magnificent, doesn't it? We can see more $1,500. This was all done in the last 2 months, by the way. If you want to see more results, you can go here to my results page where I've worked with other editors. Now, let's be honest. If I said, here's how I became a pretty good editor on YouTube, you wouldn't have clicked on this video, right? Now, let's get serious. If you're an editor who actually wants to get good and they're actually passionate about what they do, they are just struggling to find out how they can improve and how they can get results for their clients, then listen up. Because I'm going to be showing you my entire system that I've been using for the past 5 years, how I've consistently improved, how I've gotten faster without having to rely on AI, without having to rely on plugins or presets or macros. And I'm going to be showing you how I've actually made a working system for consistent iteration and consistent improvement to make videos that I actually enjoy working on and to obviously get the results for my clients, to understand how those results work and how to obviously consistently get them. Now, before I actually get into the system, we're going to be talking about how these things work. So everything in green here are my frameworks, everything in blue here are my fundamentals, and the purple stuff is my data. When it comes to frameworks, although it's very nice and it would be very cool if we could pump out consistent videos however we want to do it with all the creativity, but without order, there is only chaos, which is why it's important that we learn about how to do things and we put them into organized frameworks. Now, if you don't know, frameworks are just foundational structures that help us to build something without getting lost or without overthinking. If you freestyle all your editing work without understanding how or what works, you're gonna feel stuck. Okay, frameworks help you to beat that. Now, when it comes to the data is what I've learned from other editors, other YouTubers. It's stuff that I've learned from the world of film, because growing up, I had access to a film library of about 40,000 films, and I've watched about 1,000 of them. So I have a pretty good foundation of editing, and that data helped me to do that. We based all of our knowledge on past data, right? So you want to think about science. We have a good understanding of science and how the body works, how the mind works, because of centuries of data we have based on humans. Editing data dates all the way back to the 1900s, right? Most people, they just base their data off of Twitter and the latest style. But I've based my data off of everything that I can remember, and I've pulled it all together to create fundamentals. So editing has 6 fundamentals. And when I'm talking about editing, I'm talking about our 3 disciplines of editing: visual, sound, and story. And all of these are based on these 6 fundamentals. They're just presented in different ways. We need to learn these fundamentals, and don't worry, I've got you covered. You're on the right YouTube channel. I've basically compressed that knowledge to create my own style where I don't have to worry about getting copied, because realistically, I have pretty boring editing, but it works. First of all, we're going to be covering the material, And then we're going to be going into the mission and we're going to go down the entire system. This is very important. Now, I know I don't have like flashy editing and stuff, which is a bit ironic considering I'm talking about being the best editor in the world, but this is the best way that you're going to process information. If I had all these cool motion graphics come up to the side, you're going to get distracted, and ultimately it's just a tool for me to get you to watch to the end, which I don't give a shit for. I care about learning. Now, I had a bit of a head start. I'm going to be honest, before editing, I had nothing. I wasn't the best at sports. Dude, I wasn't even good at games. I would get lapped on Fortnite by all of my friends. I wasn't good at school. I had nothing but editing, bro. I'm going to be so real. Editing was the first thing that I got good at. And eventually that stemmed into me being one of the best in the world. And I'm going to be showing you how to do that exact same thing in this video. Starting off with the market. Now, I talk about this quite a lot, but it's pretty important that you understand how the market works. There's you, and there's other editors, and there's creators. Creators hire the editors. Now, if you charge the same as the market, but the market is better than you are, you're never going to get a job, which is why skill is really important, because the market is so big. There's like 100,000 editors. The skill can get really blurry unless you climb to the top. So we can see here, the supply of editors at the very beginning is a pretty decent amount, but no one really needs it. And then if we get to the other end of the spectrum where they're the best because they are the furthest to the right, there is a huge demand of them. And there's not a great supply of them. This is why they get paid so much, because it's all about who can have the most attractive job offer. It becomes a point where, creators are fighting over different editors. Now, for you to be successful, to be considered like one of the best, you've obviously got to be in this upper region. Now, at the beginning, you're not going to really get a lot of job offers. AI can kind of replace you, which is why you have to get your skill up to a pretty decent level. And then once you get up to a decent level, you seriously have to start changing the things that you do. So that kind of brings me to my next thing, which is about this. Now, I talk about this quite a decent amount, but it's very, very, very important that you understand how this works so you don't make the same mistakes that every other editor does. So let's say this is me. I am friend 4, and I'm lost. You see, I don't really know what I'm doing when it comes to editing, so if I'm going to improve, I'm just going to go on Twitter, I'm going to look at friend number 1, and then I'm going to bookmark his tweet so I can look at it for later. But friend 1, he kind of looks at friend 2's work on Twitter, and he kind of copies him as well. What if I told you that friend 2 looks at friend 3, and then friend 3 is looking at me, and he's bookmarking my work? So you start to notice we all kind of just copy each other. But then here's where it gets interesting. Friend 2 is looking at friend 4 of this friend group. And they are doing the same thing. They're just copying each other. This happens to 100,000 people every single day. Every single editor does this, except for the guys at the top, because they understand how this works. And I know that you do this. You go onto Twitter, you go onto Instagram, and you look at other editors' works, and then you like their tweets, or perhaps you'll bookmark it, you'll look at it for later, or you'll add it to your Notion page, your inspiration bank, or your inspiration vault. You're kind of going to look at it every now and then, but things are never going to change because you're looking at the same fucking people all the time. Are things really going to change if you look at the same things all the time? No, right? No, they are not. So this kind of brings me on to the solution, and that is being over here. We are not looking at other editors' work for inspiration. Now, why does that matter? Because I talk about this all the time, and you're probably thinking, Danny, why does it matter whose work you look at? Ultimately, it's just about what works. And, if these other editors are doing it, then it must mean that it works. Not quite. Let me show you how people work. The market wants you to do your job with minimal instructions. They want to be able to give you the work, not have to worry about it, and you do it. Right? Obviously, they're going to talk to you, see how it's going, because they're a bit of a nervous wreck all the time. Hiring people can be nerve-wracking. So you have to make sure they're doing the right job. They want you to have different work to the market, and they want you to have a better understanding of their work and their YouTube channel and their niche, which is why niching down is important. Here's where it gets pretty interesting. Now, people in general respect other people that go through pain. I want you to think about it like this. When a guy goes to the gym, and he is ripped, right? He's like 200 pounds of sheer muscle. He's like 6% body fat. He's ripped, he's like, it's crazy. He's got the muscles, he's got the broad shoulders, and he looks pretty big, and you respect him because he, at one point in his life, he wasn't like that. He was either skinny or he was fat, and having that physique is basically a message. It sends a signal to the people around him saying, I work hard. This is a result of my working hard. We kind of want to have this impact on just the market, right? So anybody hiring an editor, you want to make them look at you and be like, oh, that guy works hard. So when they look at you and they see that you went through pain, it's not going to be like, oh, I need to get rich now. It's going to be like, I'm just going to hire him and I don't care how much it costs. I'm just going to pay him that money. So your work and the uniqueness of your work and the quality of your work is a reflection of how much pain that you've endured. So your attention to detail, your quality, your uniqueness, your diligence, it shows that. It shows a trait of you going through pain every single day and they're thinking, that's someone I want to hire. So let's see how that looks at a hiring perspective. So let's say there are two editors. Let's say you're editor 1 and I'm editor 2. What you're going to do is you want to get a head start. You don't want to go through the pain. Like, why would I go in After Effects and make new stuff when I can just copy people? Because, copying works, and it does work. Don't get me wrong. When you're building something automated that just saves you time, sure, saving time, that's cool. But that's what the mid-tier YouTubers do. The guys that pay nothing, they just care about saving time. The guys at the top care about quality. So they're not going to look for people to copy. They're going to look for the people that go through the hard work. When you go to copy and editing style, you go on Twitter, you bookmark a tweet, you go and copy it, and then you paste it into your own work. Or perhaps even worse, you like and retweet and you comment underneath project file so that the person in the tweet sends you the project file. Oh dear God, please don't tell me that you're doing that. Because when you do that, you get the project file, you don't really look at it, and then you just kind of like copy things here and there. You kind of see how they did it. And that's your goal. Your goal is completed. You're done. You've copied the editing style. You've done everything that you wanted to do. You don't really have to do more work. My editing is pretty cool already. All I have to do is I need to learn how to sell. I need to learn how to sell so I can look cool. I can buy my cool watch. Fuck the watch. Who cares? Let's just look at my awkward tan line now instead of looking at the watch, because realistically, we don't care. Cool. You can sell. That is cool. That is fine. That's whatever. But ultimately, if you're good at editing, the selling does it for you. And you can only get good at editing if you go through the pain. So let's look at editor 2. Let's look at me for a second. I will learn about editing and then I will practice that editing. And then I'll realize what I did wrong. I'll look for the feedback and then I'll synthesize and then I'll practice some more. And then something will give me feedback and say that you've reached your goal, Danny. You've done it. You've made good editing without having to copy others. Now you know how editing works. And these tasks are harder than these tasks. You're basically just pressing Control-C, Control-V. That's not very difficult. But these go through like hours upon hours every single day of grueling pain. And it sucks. But it gets me to my goal, which is to understand editing and to get better at editing. Like I said, I had nothing going on. All I had was editing. All I wanted to do was be good, because that's all I was ever good at. When creators look at this, they can see the reflection of the hard work that you've gone through, the pain that you've gone through. When you're making good work that is different to others, they look at you like they look at the people here. Like the guy with the six-pack, the guy with a lot of money, the guy with the beautiful women, the guy that can perform like crazy good calisthenics and rock climbing and is super strong. Or, the guy with burn marks, like he's probably some kind of like hero. You respect that because he went through pain and hard work. All of these guys. When you do this, creators can see that through the uniqueness of your work. So let's now move on to mission and execution. Now that we know about the whole uniqueness ideal and, obviously providing value to clients and beating the market on a daily basis, we now need to learn how we can execute our mission. You're probably noticing very quickly that I'm using a lot of big words here. Mission and execution, material, Danny's market combat system, data, fundamentals, framework. I'm not doing that so I can sound cool, but when in your own mind you make these things sound cool, when you make it sound like you're going to war, the very basic task of typing on your keyboard and dragging the keyframes and the layers and then adding a transition, and when you do all of this stuff, it's like boring stuff. But when you make it sound cool in your own head, all you want to do is take over. Like, nobody likes the idea of dragging shit on a screen for 10 hours straight and then rewatching the footage to see if you like it. No one enjoys doing that. That is a pretty boring thing to do. But when you approach it like it's some kind of like sport, like Olympic level sport, when you take the pride in beating others and being better than others, it drives you to do better, right? You want to get better. You treat this like it's life or death. I've, over the years, learned that editing kind of works a bit like this. So we have editing and we have our 3 forms or our 3 disciplines. And then to efficiently edit, you have to go through these 6 fundamentals: continuity, hierarchy, pacing, tone, emphasis, structure. These will help you to create a video that's easy to understand. These will create emotionally engaging videos, and these will create things that aren't hard to look at, essentially. And then what you as the editor will do is you will present it in a certain form of stimuli. Now, the stimuli is like the language code. It's like the way of doing it. So your stimuli could be through copy and pasting. You could go and copy another editing style. And then editing styles are essentially just made up and created from these 6 fundamentals. All of these fundamentals, they always come together to create this cool new editing style. And only the top editors at the top of the market, these are the guys that are creating the styles. And then the lower level editors, they go and they copy because they can't be asked to go through the pain of creating their own. So then you just copy the tools that are required to output this stimuli. And then eventually this will put viewers into a fundamental state. And then this fundamental state will lead to immersion and then entertainment. Once they are entertained, they can allow themselves to feel emotion towards it, right? They start to sink in to the build up of the video, and they feel relatively immersed. And then once people feel emotional about this subject or this video, right? Obviously, the longer it goes on, the more emotion that's built up, they start to take action, because emotion is simply just the motion of mental state. The more you can do that to somebody, the more they're likely to take action. So if a video moves me and I cry, and I'm like, that was beautiful, well done, I'm gonna like and subscribe, and I'm probably gonna share it to my friends. And then once action is taken, that breeds results. So then that's how you get results for your clients. And that's how I consistently get results for my clients, is because I understand this well enough to do this. I also know that in order to get paid the most, I have to be the furthest along in the chart and just the general graph of skill. I can't get away with it by saying I'm a good salesman, or I'm this and that, or I read business books, because ultimately, yeah, sure, you can read that, but so can like 100 other people. You know what 100 other people can't do is that they can't go through the pain of, just getting good enough and making their own style. I also was able to look at myself and tell myself, hey man, we're not doing enough work. We are not getting the gratification that we want from the market and from the clients. So I was able to basically take control of my laziness, my inputs, and so on and so forth, right? I could basically just tell when I was getting complacent. And obviously this took years of work. Now I'm pretty comfortable. I work every single day without any problems. I work every single day. Obviously I still have my constraints. I can still feel crazy resistance to do certain things. And then on top of this, I understood that I had to make people feel, I had to make sure they knew where to look, and I had to make sure that I was grabbing their attention with my editing, of course. So essentially, I would start off with my workflow. I would start off with my story. So I had a framework screen. It's a rough concept, but it's generally what I do. I'd also have one for my visuals, which is called Idea. I'd have one for my sound design, which is called Tavar. Also another rough one, but generally they all get to the point. I have a bunch of images in these frameworks to basically, give a rough explanation of how they work, because otherwise we would be here for like 100 hours. So we're going to start off with the build. When it came to storytelling, there was a handful of things I needed to understand, or I needed to do. So these are the things that I generally need to understand. I need to understand how to add support systems throughout the video, on top of learning how retention works at first principle, on top of learning how my audience reacts, or more specifically, my client's audience reacts. I also need to learn how, narratives work, and how underlying narratives work, and how to, world build. But, on top of all of that, I had to do my support systems, and I had to include my curiosity triggers, because YouTube nowadays is all about attention, all about curiosity, and it's pretty important to know about these. So I'd obviously have my support systems feeding into my curiosity triggers. So these are essentially things that just help viewers to understand where the progress is going, how are we moving forward, where are we currently in this world of, the YouTube video. Also, we have to learn how to make sure that they stay curious, because when a viewer clicks on a video, the curiosity is built from the thumbnail. And I'm not the thumbnail designer, but I just have to make sure that they're continuously feeling like they're getting what they originally came for. Because when you click on a thumbnail, that curiosity is sparked for a second. Then they click, then they watch the ads. Then what? By the time the 30 seconds or the 5 seconds is up, they forgot why they originally clicked on the video. So now we have to win them back with the intro. And then after the intro, we have to do it again and again and again and again. But then on top of this, of course, as an editor, you have to learn how retention works. So I didn't really know how to approach this, other than obviously at first you'd look at all of the Colin and Samir videos. You'd look at the John Uche videos. You'd look at all the Mr. Beast interviews. But after that, things get a little bit more serious, and I started to study the mind of children in like a PG friendly way, right? Get your head out the gutter. When I'd study their minds, it wasn't like some creepy scientist kind of like Zapatron on their brain kind of shit. It's more so just like looking at past studies, looking at past university papers of how children would keep their eyes on the screen, or they would maintain focus, they'd maintain attention, they'd maintain understanding or being distracted, and how to grab their attention. And after countless papers, I eventually kind of had a good understanding, a good first principle understanding of how their minds worked. Then I had to actually learn about who I was making these for. So the reason I actually did studies on children was because children are the most common viewers for the biggest channels in the world, because they're the easiest to make videos for. And, you know, let's be real, it's not like they have a job to go to. So understanding how children thought was the first step, but I also had to understand specifically about the niche that I was working in and the people I was editing for. And luckily, you know, a lot of the content that I was working for was designed for people like me. So I would be able to understand the jokes they'd make in the videos because it was more designed towards me. And that was a lot more enjoyable. That was a lot more easier. But when it was coming to stuff like Roblox or Fortnite, I had to get into the mind of somebody who plays Fortnite, somebody who watches these Fortnite videos, somebody who watches my clients. And, you know, that would come through numerous steps, but eventually I'd understand how that works. On top of that, I had to learn how narratives worked. I had to build my own framework for creating unique points in videos that viewers could feed off of, and how to basically just engagement farm. Because when it comes to YouTube, we're not exactly the film industry, but also we are heading towards there. We are slowly getting towards a point where we're becoming the film industry through just our YouTube videos. Scripted content doesn't really exist anymore because everybody scripts their videos. And narrative building is crucial to understand if your client doesn't script their videos. And I've had a lot of expensive clients that would pay me about like $2,000 to $3,000 per video and still have no idea how to script videos or how to plan videos. So it was basically my job to pony up and to become the like producer really, and to understand how to create proper stories in case they didn't. Then these would all be based again on those same fundamental principles of continuity, hierarchy. You get the idea. But then these fundamental principles would be injected into like the main elements of storytelling. So the footage and the vision, because we don't really have a lot except for the footage. We'd have to know about who's watching. We'd have to understand the niche of it, and obviously the stuff, because apart from the footage, we don't really have a lot. So these are the main elements of story. Then after story, I would move into my visuals. Now visuals is where most editors feel pretty uncomfortable with. They enjoy it, but they don't know what works. So they feel troubled, right? Now, in case this is you, I'm going to conclude a very quick plug here. I actually help editors to do all of this in their editing, and that's why I was able to get these results for them and how to create this work without any confusion and, you know, without feeling left behind. So if this sounds like you and you want to get to a point where you're getting these kinds of results, then you can go down below and you can book a call with me where we're going to talk about your problems. We're going to talk about why you can't come up with these frameworks by yourself and why you can't, you know, seem to stay focused, or any kinds of problems you have. And we're going to sort everything out there. It's completely free. Don't worry. Just book over there and we'll talk further. Anyways, back to the video. Now, when it comes to idea, so I'd base idea off of, you know, the main workflow steps for building motion graphics or visuals. So I'd obviously create my idea, then I would create the design, then I'd add my effects, and then I would animate things into the next composition. And I'd have multiple frameworks for these individuals. So it's not just about having a framework called idea, it's about having frameworks within the framework based on fundamentals injected into the elements of visuals. So stuff like your text layers, stuff like your shape layers, stuff like your footage, your B-roll, stuff like your CCs and your CGs, and stuff like your just effects, you know, in your effect library. So pretty simple stuff. So I'd have my frameworks for creating my idea. I would have my frameworks for creating my design and all the basic design principles, which if you don't know, stuff like hierarchy, stuff like balance, stuff like rhythm is a must know for your design. Generally, design is 80% of your motion graphics, and your motion graphics are the most marketable form of editing, which means that these are the first things that clients look at when they want to hire you, because it's the easiest thing to judge. So if you don't understand design, learn about hierarchy, learn about balance, learn about rhythm, and then you'll be one step further to getting pretty decent clients. I'd also learn about like things way beyond that. I would learn about things like providing context through B-roll, just the intro, just the sound and text just through one frame and providing context through just shapes, which obviously is very difficult to do, but after a while you get used to it. Then we'd move into effects. I would use my general frameworks for creating better effects, getting faster at the effects, understanding how effects work, building realism through effects, building ambiance through effects, a whole bunch of different things. Then ultimately, obviously, I'd have my animation principles. You can obviously see some of the images are the same because they apply the same laws. And again, these are then all created. All of these frameworks that you're seeing, all of these pictures are frameworks, and then these frameworks are created from the principles, and then we use these via our tools like our text layers, our shape layers, B-roll, yada yada yada. Then after the visuals, you move on to the sound, because sound effects and Foley supports the visuals, and the music is like the backbone to the story, so you can't really create the story without the music, right? Because the music accommodates the story. Sometimes I would work with actual sound mixers and some actual producers, and they would help to teach me about how they look at sound and how they think about it. And it opened my mind to a whole new world. But most of the time, you won't really have the luxury of working with sound mixers. It'll mostly just be you and maybe a couple of other editors. So tonality is really big. You know, I'd have my own sound and music pack that I downloaded. It had about 5,000 items in there. I would have assignments, so I'd obviously have to assign sound effects to certain actions. I would download completely a regular Foley. Foley being the sound effects and the mimicking of other actions. So this could be used as like a, I don't know, like a brick, or like the sound of outside construction. It's a really weird thing. Then we would move on to variation. So sound variation, instrumental variation, how to create very clear cutting contrasts in themes and tones between your different parts of the video, because emotion state cycling is very important in your videos. If your viewers are feeling the same thing all the time, retention goes down. It's boring. I've seen these before. I don't want to watch it again. That's the whole point of variation in sound and in video. You need to take viewers through different emotions. If you want to get results for clients, they must feel different things throughout the video. Then we'll be moving on to the ambiance. So building a world, and that kind of actually goes hand in hand with homogenization. So these are basically the same things, right? So I'd be building a general certain ambiance to my videos using something that I call tonal homogenization, which, if you don't know, is essentially just using different effects to manipulate how the sound sounds. So for example, if I collected 5 different music tracks and they were all in the same genre of music that I wanted, but they didn't sound exactly how I wanted them, then I would use effects and I would edit them so people would no longer hear the music. When they listen to the music, the first thing they're going to think of is the effects and then the music. So that can only really happen if you have enough effects applied at the same time. When you hear music in a movie and it's muffled, your first thought isn't, oh, what music is that? Your first thought is, there's music coming from somewhere in the movie, but it's obviously like in a different room. And if they're playing that from a different room, I'm assuming it means something. And then, you know, your brain will think about everything but how the music sounds. It's a whole process, but homogenization essentially just helps me to not have to pay $1,000 a year for good music, right? I can still use stuff like, you know, Epidemic Sounds or Artlist and still have music unique to every other editor, because creators hate it when editors are using basic music. And then again, these are based on fundamental principles, and then these are based on the music, the Foley, and the effects, the raw tools of war, the actual elements that you use within your sound design and your sound mixing process. So far, we've collected that I have a bunch of these frameworks that were made to complete my mission of everything on here, that was based on the things that I had already known about YouTube and the things that I had known about the market and the things that I knew about my competitors. And what this would do, this entire process, which by the way, it's not something that I knew off the bat. This is what took me like 4 years to learn. It took me quite a decent amount of time. And I'm obviously continuously learning, but I just had kind of built these rough structures and these rough frameworks in my head. And this would create the piece, which is the video. You know, so by the end of this entire workflow, I'd finally have my video. And then when I send it over to the client and they upload it, or they give me revisions, or they tell me what they think, that gives me data. Now, this data, as you can see through the lines, if we see where it goes, it feeds all the way back into my main material. So what I already knew starts getting built upon based on what the clients say. Now, if you're submitting your videos and you don't learn from the revisions, you don't learn from the client, you don't study what they say, you don't study what words they use, you don't just like look at what they say and try to learn from it. If you don't do the same with what the comments say and with how the video performs, then it's gonna be much harder for you to improve because you don't have something to base it off of. You just base it off your own emotions, and your emotions are wrong like 90% of the time. So please don't be stupid and start listening to your clients, start listening to the feedback that you get. Now, your feedback could be literally anything. It could be the retention that you get. So it could be like the retention in the intro that you get. It could be the amount of comments you get on a video. It could be something that the client says, you know, so I want to let you know the video's popping off and they fucked with it heavy. So it could be a good thing, but it could also be bad things. You know, when clients say, don't bother, thank you for your time, you're fired, or you're shit, or I hate you, that could be the same thing. Right? It could also be like the feedback that they actually give you, the things they actually say about the video. So the actual specific things that they like, take that into account. It could be what the comments actually say. So not only just about like how many comments, but it could be about what the actual comments say. It could be about more stuff like the 1 out of 10. It could be about what they say about working with you in the future, or their experience of working with you. So this data could be literally anything, but it has to be the response, or it has to be something directly about the video, straight after the video has been uploaded or seen or whatever. Overall, this is eventually how you learn. And then once you understand that, that feeds back into your big brain. And then you know, you have a better understanding of what clients want. And believe me, I've been doing this for 5 years. I'm an old man. I'm 20, but I still feel like an old man. So ultimately, you know what to do and you know how to get closer to completing your mission. And then you iterate on your frameworks. If you don't have frameworks, you build them. And then that's going to be improved upon. And then ultimately, you do this. Now, if you feel like this is too much, I've got like action steps here, but that's 47 action steps. It's quite a lot. And even then, within them, there's many steps that you have to do. And then this is going to take to a long list that if you wanted to do by yourself would take you years to get to. So I'm going to quickly offer you something because you've watched throughout the entire way, and I want to reward you by quickly just pitching you, right? I'm going to be so serious. I actually really enjoy helping editors, and you can see the results that I've gotten for them. And if you haven't gone to this website, then you haven't seen the results, but I'd recommend you go look so you can see the kind of results I'm getting for editors just like you. If you've watched the whole way, then you want to be one of the best. You want to be really good. And there's a reason for that. Like you probably have shit friends, or friends that don't support you, or family that don't support you. And you want to have like this big, super good editor skilled middle finger that says to everybody, I'm good at what I do and I'm the best and nobody can talk back to me. And if you're just somebody who wants to get better, if you're somebody who wants to scale their editing business, then you can go down below to the link where you can talk to me about it and we can take the steps further ahead. And, you know, who knows, you'll get a bit of value out of it as well on how you can get better. And, you know, you can learn about how I can help you out. So if that sounds like you, book a call below for a time that suits you. And that's about it. Apart from that, you have a good day.